Hello, everybody. We're back for our 2 o'clock lecture. J. Kevin Graffagnino holds degrees in American history from the University of Vermont and University of Massachusetts. He served as curator of Vermont history at the UVM Library from 1978 to 1995.
Hello,
As the library director at the State Historical Society of Wisconsin, and as executive director of the Kentucky and Vermont State Historical Societies. From 2008 to 2019, Graffagnino was director. Is it Graffagnino or Graffagnino was director of the University of Michigan's William L. Clements Library. He is author, editor of 25 books on various aspects of Vermont and American history. Let's please welcome J. Kevin Graffagnino.
Thanks. Thank you. It's been about 20 years since I addressed this group, so apparently you decided it was long enough and you'd forgotten that talk. Brief commercial announcement before our regularly scheduled program. Paul Stabler tells me that this is the most literate group in the state of Vermont and that you buy more books per capita than any other group. So we are having a sale for you today. Ira Allen, a biography, back table. How many people here read the New York Times? Oh, then most of you saw the review that said, a magisterial triumph of original scholarship in prose so eloquent it makes the archangels weep with envy. You can buy one of these today for $20. They're $25 in any bookstore. Much more importantly, how many people in this room collect something, anything? Okay, about a third of you. How many people in this room are grandparents? Almost all of you. Good, you're my linked demographic here. So I have for you two equally magnificent books about collecting Vermont history. If you collect something, I want you to switch to collecting Vermont. You're all here in Vermont. Vermont books, Vermont maps, Vermont broadsides, Vermont photographs are out there waiting for you. This will be your Bible. It will help you figure out what to collect, why they're cool, why you want some, where you can get them, etc. This is a book of essays about how much fun it is to collect Vermont. I need to have the grandparents in the room buy one copy for each grandchild, because I need to see young people coming into this field of mine. I've been doing this for 54 years. I'm 71 years old. I go out and I do these talks. I'm still often the youngest person in the room at 71. I really need to see your grandchildren coming to these talks, coming to auctions, going to book fairs, coming into the field that I've spent my life in. These two books, I hope, will help. You can have either of these, both of these, for $40 a piece. Now, since by now you are convinced that I am nothing but a shameless grifter, let me tell you, this book, $20 today, I pay $15 a piece for them. So I make $5 when I sell one. Each of these, $40 a piece to you fine people. I pay $40 a piece for each of them. So I make nothing when I sell you one. As my wife Leslie says, our Kevin is a financial genius. Harvard will be calling soon to get him to come down and lecture on retail strategy for booksellers. I schlepped all these books all the way over here from Essex. I do not want to schlep them back. Come back after the talk and buy a book or two or three. If you don't have any money, I give you the book, you send me a check. I've been doing this all over Vermont for a year and a half. Nobody has stiffed me yet, and I don't want anybody from EEE to decide this is the time. All right, my topic today is Ira Allen. I started a Vermont Life article about Ira a good 40 years ago with the catchphrase, For most Vermonters, Ira Allen is a hard founding father to love. What I meant by that is, like any society, Vermonters want to revere the founding generation, the people who created our state, the people who explored and settled here in the early decades. We have a deep admiration for our first governor, Thomas Chittenden. We name counties, we name medical centers, we name lots of things, banks. Well, some of us are old enough to remember the Chittenden Bank, which is now, I think, M&T Bank. We really think a lot. He's our George Washington. He's the guy who led Vermont from statehood, from independence to statehood. And all of you by now know the 250th anniversary stuff. Here in Vermont, it's 14 years long, because we don't get to the 250th of joining the Union until 2041. The rest of the country has a few years. We got a long period of celebration. We have absolute reverence for Ethan Allen. Ethan Allen is our Davy Crockett, our Daniel Boone. He's the big, rough, tough frontier hero who beats up the Yorkers, takes Ticonderoga, saves Vermont left and right. We name everything in Vermont after Ethan Allen. We've got military units, parkways, park in the north end of Burlington, bowling alleys, laundromats, dogs and cats. I mean, Ethan is our guy. If Ira Allen, Ethan's youngest brother, has a counterpart in his own generation, it's Aaron Burr. Someone else who reached too far, was too ambitious, was not well liked by his contemporaries, and doesn't find any affection in history of the past 2 centuries. My principal point today is, I don't care whether you like Ira Allen, but you've got to get him in the picture. That you can't put him on a pedestal is no reason to leave him out. If you do, you have a massive hole in your knowledge of early Vermont. So, Ira Allen is 19 years old when he comes from western Connecticut up to what is known as the New Hampshire Grants, the territory between the Connecticut River on the east and the Hudson River, Lake Champlain on the west. It is a time when Yankees, who are New England settlers and speculators who have bought their land from New Hampshire, from Benning Wentworth's land grants, are battling with Yorkers, who have bought their land from New York granted townships. And that becomes a big, big fight in Vermont in the early to mid 1770s. When Ira arrives, a New York court has just ruled that no New Hampshire title gives you legal ownership, which dispossesses most of the settlers and a ton of speculators. Ethan Allen responds by helping to form the Green Mountain Boys, who are a guerrilla unit whose sole purpose is keep New York from governing. Do not let their surveyors work here. Do not let their justices of the peace or their courts or any other New York official do their jobs in the territory that will become Vermont. And Ethan is beautifully suited for this, because Ethan's about 6'2", 240, which in 18th century terms means he's about the size of Shaquille O'Neal. Those of you who like basketball, when Ethan threatens you, you are afraid, because he can beat the living daylights out of you. Ira is 5'6", weighs about 120 pounds in his early 20s. His best punch wouldn't dent a mosquito. Ira is also an introvert. Ethan is a flaming extrovert. If he were giving this talk, he'd be standing on the table, because he'd want a bigger audience and a bigger bang for his buck. Ira thus takes a much, much more personal, introspective, reclusive way of moving ahead. He looks around. He rides with the Green Mountain Boys once in a while, but not often. Instead, he looks around and he says, all these people moving in, trying to find out where their farm is, trying to find out where their mill site is. Most of them don't have the faintest idea because land surveyors have not been up here to lay out the towns. Any frontier society needs land surveyors. So Ira goes back to Western Connecticut in the winter of 1770-71, apprentices himself to a master surveyor down there for 3 whole weeks, and declares that he too is a master surveyor. Now, I spoke to the Vermont Society of Land Surveyors a couple weeks ago, and I had done so before, and I knew that their vision of that is 3 weeks and you're a master surveyor. Yeah, that's like 1 semester at UVM med school and you're a brain surgeon. It's a lot more complicated than that. But this doesn't stop Ira. Rest of his life, master surveyor Ira Allen. And he starts to get commissions from the town proprietors. They're speculators. They live in southern New England. They're not coming up here, but they want to sell and lease their land. They have to have some idea where it is. So a surveyor is a very valuable professional to them. Ira gets commissions to come up and survey townships, particularly in the northwest quadrant of Vermont. Chittenden, Franklin, Grand Isle, Washington, Addison, Rutland counties. He takes his pay in land. So he's building a portfolio without having to spend any money to do so. He also develops an unparalleled knowledge of where the good land is. Every town that is going to be developed up here is going to need a sawmill, a grist mill, and a forge. You are going to power them with water because you have no electricity, no other means of power. Ira finds out and marks in his brain where the best land is in every town that he surveys. He also begins developing a lifelong reputation as a guy you keep your hand on your wallet when you negotiate with him. And he tells a story decades later about himself that's always puzzled me, because I can't read it as anything other than you were a sneaky little guy, and he somehow thinks of it as, look at me, I was so smart. He comes up, he surveys the town of Mansfield, which is today partly Stowe, partly Underhill. It includes Mount Mansfield. Ira finds that his land in Mansfield is the top of the mountain, which means in a pre-Volvo, pre-Ski-Tow era, it is worthless. You can't farm the top of Mount Mansfield. But he goes back to the proprietors, again, southern New England speculators, and says, I'll sell any land I own up there except my Mansfield land. And they're intrigued, and they say, why is that? He says, because my Mansfield land is covered in gumwood trees. They didn't know what a gumwood tree is. You don't know. I don't know. So they ask him, and he says, a gumwood tree is tall, straight hardwood, much like the cherry tree. So it's valuable for building houses, for paneling, for furniture making, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I would bet half the people in this room have been on or near the top of Mount Mansfield. It's not covered in gumwood trees. It's covered in rocks and ice and snow and some scruffy pines that can survive up there. But by the time Ira is done, the Mansfield proprietors have bought his mountaintop at a profit and given him land in what will become Stowe Village. So he walks away a happy young man. And even though Ira is the youngest of the 6 Allen brothers, Ethan is 14 years older than Ira. So Ira's a child to Ethan as a young man. And even as the smallest, he's the weakest, he's the youngest. His brother's nickname for him is Stub, which gives you a pretty good idea where he ranks in the patriarchy of the Allen family. He goes back to Connecticut in the winter of 1772-73, calls a family council of the brothers and cousin Remember Baker, and says, you guys have got it all wrong. You've been buying land up there willy-nilly wherever something comes up in a tavern, wherever it seems cheap. You have no core, you have no philosophy, and you have no plan. I have seen the future. The future is the Champlain Valley. The future is the rivers that flow into Lake Champlain and the towns that border the lake. That's where we are going to become the wealthiest family in northern New England. And he persuades them to create the Onion River Land Company, which is a family speculative venture to buy land in the northwest quadrant and develop it at their pace and become wealthy. It's a great plan. And the brothers and Cousin Baker agree to it, and they start ditching their lands in the southern half of Vermont and adding lands in the northwestern part of Vermont. By the time the American Revolution begins, the Allen brothers have 100,000 acres of prime property up here. It's a lot of land. But then the Revolution comes, and nobody on the American side can settle north of Rutland because the British control the lake, and they control the valley, and their raids from Canada will scoop you up, and you'll either be a prisoner or you'll be dead. Thomas Chittenden has a farm in Williston. He goes all the way back to Arlington to spend the American Revolution. It's not safe. So there's a brake put on the progress of the Allen dream. But the war also gives the people living here the opportunity to determine their political future. Because all of a sudden, New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Congress have a lot more important things to worry about than disputes in the back country of Vermont. And the Yankee leaders, Thomas Chittenden, the Allens, a few others say, you know, if the 13 colonies can become the 13 states based on rhetoric of brave yeoman farmers yearning to breathe free against British tyranny, we can adapt that for local consumption. We are brave Yankee yeoman farmers yearning to breathe free against New York tyranny. New Yorkers are loyalists. New Yorkers are landlords rather than freehold. New Yorkers have a county-based system of government against our New England town-based system, and it works. They get enough support from the population to create the first new state in America. The first addition to the 13 colonies or states is Vermont. We create Vermont under the name New Connecticut in January of 1777. We change the name to Vermont that summer because Western Pennsylvania has been thought of as New Connecticut, and voila, we exist. We are beset on all sides by enemies and people who are covetous about our land and everything else, but we hang on. And Ira Allen becomes the Allen family's principal leader in that shaky new government. You'd have expected Ethan to do it because Ethan wanted to lead everything, but Ethan, military genius that he was in his own mind, goes up to Montreal in fall of 1775 and tries to take the city from the British with about 200 militiamen, who vanish when the first musket is fired in their direction. Ethan is captured, taken across the Atlantic to England after the British commander decides not to execute him. And the British, to their considerable unhappiness, find that he's a rock star in England. He is bold, he is certainly different, and the British people love him. So much so that the British ship him back across the Atlantic to Long Island. And he's there for 2.5 years. So he's out of the scene in Vermont. He can't help. Ira steps up. Thomas Chittenden steps up. Ira becomes the first state treasurer, which means that the state's finances are in his saddlebags. There's no staff, there's no building, there's no money, except Reuben Harmon's copper coins. But Ira writes a lot of IOUs, we'll pay you maybe, we'll pay you someday, etc. He becomes Thomas Chittenden's principal secretary because Chittenden was a man of some real leadership talent, but he could barely read and write. Go to UVM Special Collections, ask to see the Chittenden letter written the last month or two of his life to the lieutenant governor saying, I'm sick, I can't preside at the legislature, you do it. Take on the mantle of a man, he tells Lieutenant Governor Brigham. It's as if your 7-year-old grandson wrote it. It really was not a skill of Thomas Chittenden's. So you're writing everything for the governor. That's a fair amount of influence. Ira also becomes our principal ambassador to the outside world. Revolutionary Vermont has almost no military might. We can't fight off outside threats. We have to talk our way out of them. So Chittenden and the council send people like Ira Allen to Congress, to Massachusetts, to New Hampshire, to New York even, to talk for us. And I remember, he's in his mid-20s at this point. This is pretty good for a guy who never made it past what you or I would consider high school. He's our ambassador to the world. Most importantly for Ira, the legislature decides and the people vote that Ira should be the first state surveyor general. Because what Vermont has that allows it to exist, we have land to sell. Benning Wentworth only granted 2/3 of Vermont. The other third is there for Vermont to make new townships, charge fees, and not have any taxes. Think of it, our beloved state with no taxes. I think that's what the legislature is working on now. But it allows the government to remain moderately popular, because the minute they started to tax the population, that popularity would diminish sharply. The legislature puts the surveyor general in charge of this. So Ira gets to determine who gets a new township. He gets to put his own name on the list of proprietors if he feels like it. He gets to take his salary for his several positions in land in the new township. So basically you've put the biggest land speculator in Vermont in charge of land speculation in Vermont. This might be akin to take a man with billions of dollars in federal contracts and put him in charge of reducing the government budget. Oh, wait a minute, we did that. Ira prospers. Vermont and Ira's horses go apace. They are both moving ahead, and Ira is adding to his portfolio without spending any money again. His most controversial work for Vermont during the Revolution comes in what are known as the Haldeman negotiations. In 1780, the British in England look at the war, and nobody knows who's going to win in 1780. We had Saratoga. They won battles in the South. It's back and forth. The British still control New York City. And the British say, that funny pinched up little place north of Boston, they say they're a state. They keep asking Congress to be let in. And Congress keeps saying, no, not now. Not while New York disagrees. Not during the war. What if we bring them back into the British Empire? What if we make them a part of their own province controlled by England? It solidifies our control of the Champlain Valley. It splits northern New England off from the American Revolution, and it might win the war for us, because it might be an example where we could do it to other states as well. So they send a British spy up to southern Vermont. Ethan is sort of living in Arlington, Sunderland. And to talk to Ethan, who's now back. He left the prison yard on Long Island in spring of 1780. So fall of 1780, he's back, and he's the only Vermonter the British have ever heard of, because he was a rock star in England And he's published a biography, an autobiography, which has sold very, very well. He's a somebody. A British spy comes in secret to Ethan and says, "What do you think? We'll make you your own province. We'll ratify all the New Hampshire land titles. We'll give you basically anything you want if you bring Vermont back into the empire." And Ethan's initial response is, "I don't want to be Benedict Arnold, who's just been unmasked, almost captured." But Ethan goes on to say, on the other hand, it's not a bad idea, and maybe we should talk about it. Congress, as Ethan says, has closed the door to the south. You've opened the door to the north, and maybe we should think about going through it. So, Ethan Allen, Ira Allen, Thomas Chittenden, the Fay brothers from Bennington, one or two other Vermont leaders are in on this. They start conversing with the British, and they're called the Haldimand negotiations because General Frederick Haldimand is in charge in Canada. And the negotiations are conducted through him and his agents, mostly at the north end of Lake Champlain. There's a British fort there. You read any biography of Ethan Allen, and they come out every 5 or 6 years, unlike Ira. Ira now has 2 in the last century. There will be another 4 or 5 Ethan biographies in the next 15 years because of our semi-quincentennial. Every Ethan biographer who's ever put pen to paper says Ethan was in charge, and the others just did what he said. And I have never believed this. I think it severely underestimates Thomas Chittenden, who was governor after all. It underestimates Ira, the Fay brothers, etc., etc. And it's not logical to me. If I'm engaging in American treason, and this is treason in American terms, to be directly negotiating with a military enemy for a purpose that the country has not approved, I do not want a loud, extroverted, heavy drinking, known everywhere, all over the place, guy acting as my first spy. I want somebody sneaky, sly, can attend a meeting like this and afterwards nobody remembers he was here. Well, to me, that's Ira Allen, and it seemed to be that way to Thomas Chittenden. Ira does most of the negotiating for Vermont. Ira goes to the north end of Lake Champlain to talk with Haldimand's agents. Very early on, the agents write back to Haldimand in Quebec, "We don't like him. We don't trust him. He tells us one thing in the morning. He tells us one different thing in the afternoon. No means maybe, maybe means yes, yes means anything he wants it to when he says it." It's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall to get a straight answer out of this guy. And Haldimand writes back to his agents, "I understand, but the goal is big enough. Keep talking, keep negotiating." And this goes on for over a year. America starts to pay attention, in part because Haldimand stops raiding the Champlain Valley. He's now treating us like an ally. He returns prisoners of war. Vermont is no longer the enemy to the British in Canada, and this seems a bit suspicious. Rumors are flying that Vermont is about to leave the Revolution and rejoin England. So the Vermont legislature, most of whom, during the American Revolution, I think you could have said about almost any part of America, a third of the population is solidly patriotic to the American cause. Quarter of the population leaning towards England because that's what we've always done. We've always had a king. And everybody in the middle, like most people, waiting to find out who's going to win and then declaring for that side. The legislature calls Ira in and says, next session, You are going to give us an explanation. What are you doing up there? What's going on? And it's an open session, which means there's a public gallery. Haldeman finds out about this and sends 2 British spies down to be in the gallery. What does he say when he's not up here? Ira gives one speech and makes both sides happy, which I find extraordinary. He said decades later, "Is it not curious to see 2 opposing sides, each deceiving themselves and believing what they wish to believe?" It is. It's extraordinary. Again, this guy is now almost 30. You need a backbone of titanium to pull this off, but he does it. And so things go on. And then finally, in the fall of 1781, after a year, Haldeman becomes impatient. He sends an army south from Canada to the south end of Lake Champlain. And they have a written proclamation welcoming Vermont back into the British Empire. Now, if that gets released, the Allens have only 2 choices: flee to the British lines for safety, or somehow persuade Vermonters that it's in their interest to go ahead with this. So it's fish or cut bait time in Vermont terms for the Allen brothers. And then word comes from Virginia. Cornwallis has surrendered at Yorktown, and the war is over. The British are not going to send another army across the Atlantic. The war is done. America has won. It'll take a little while to negotiate everything. Haldeman withdraws his army and the proclamation, and from that day on, Ira Allen starts controlling the narrative. And the narrative for Ira Allen is, we never meant to do it. We were only tricking the British. We got them to stop raiding in northern New York and in northern Vermont and in northern New Hampshire. We just pulled the wool over their eyes because we were brave American patriots. And we won the war, and by God, we want credit for it. This is the Vermont story that holds in this state until the 1940s. You couldn't have stood in front of a Vermont audience and said, I think the Allens might have been serious, as an option. Rejected by Congress, so much of their future plugged into the Champlain Valley, which after the war is going to have to trade with Canada, because you trade when you can on water. In the 18th century, the rivers flow into the lake, and the lake flows to the Richelieu River to Quebec City. You can't go to Albany in the 18th century on Lake Champlain. So I think, particularly Ira, this was a viable option. And outside scholars start to say this in the 1940s. And they point to that economic advantage for the Allens, which most Vermonters do not share. They don't have hundreds of thousands of acres in northwestern Vermont. Their outlook is their farm and their town. They're not trying to build a commercial empire. As convincingly, they point out that the Allens keep telling Haldeman after the war, we still want to do it. There's no military threat after 1781. But into the late 1780s, the Allens are still saying, we're still talking, right? We're still negotiating. We still want to be part of the British Empire. So, I don't say this to criticize the Allens. They had asked a dozen times to become part of the United States. And this is a United States that had existed for 5 or 6 years at this point. I don't want to impose 21st century certainty that the United States will become the greatest country in the history of the world, and they should have known that. It wasn't a set fact in 1781, and America had repeatedly rejected the overtures to become the 14th state. So the war ends. And it's like letting a dam loose in terms of settlement in this part of Vermont. There's no military threat from Canada. You can come up here and it's good, fertile land by southern New England standards. It's relatively cheap. It's a little bit of the Wild West socially, but it's really hot real estate. And the Allens are ready. Ethan moves to the north end of Burlington. Ethan Allen Homestead, you've all been there. Should all go back. Volunteers, they need more volunteers. Ira builds that house for his big brother, to his brother's specifications. Ira moves north from Sunderland, way down in Bennington County, to the falls of the Winooski River in what is today the city of Winooski. If you go down from Burlington, past Greenmount Cemetery, down the hill, cross the bridge, and you're looking straight ahead, big brick building with the big eagle, the Eagle Block in Winooski. It's a miracle that eagle hasn't been stolen by some antiques thief. And don't any of you try it. You probably could rappel down from the roof. That's where Ira's house was. He built his house there, not a McMansion, a home, and the reason is because his mills, the best mills he had, were at the falls of the Winooski. That's the best mill site in northwestern Vermont, and Ira knew it. And he builds mills and he starts to do things. He gets distracted along the way. He gets married. He's in his late 30s before I can find any evidence that he ever said hello to a woman. And all of a sudden he marries a 25-year-old daughter of General Roger Enos of Enosburg, calls her my favorite Miss Enos, and takes her home. Now, I have never found any evidence that family or romance were priorities for Ira. His older brother Levi, who's a loyalist, he's a severe alcoholic, the worst businessman in 18th century America. If you wanted to make sure your business failed, you asked Levi Allen to be your partner. But Levi, he's so romantic. His letters are at UVM. His long-suffering wife, Nancy, he's away all the time, failing at something new. He writes these letters. The sun, the moon, the stars do not shine as bright, my love, when we are apart. I almost cannot breathe without you in the next room. Ira signs his letters to Jerusha, your friend Ira Allen. I mean, I can do better than that. He gets involved in the creation of the University of Vermont. How many people here are UVM parents, alumni? Yeah, the rest of you couldn't get in, I take it. Yeah. My family has 8 UVM degrees in the last half century. Everybody knows Vermont is accepted into the Union as the 14th state after 14 years of independence in March of 1791. Everybody in Vermont knows that one thing the legislature will do that fall is charter a state university, because we're a state and you need symbols, and a university proves we're for real, or helps prove it. The question is going to be, where will the university be located? Because the legislature, starting a proud 250-year tradition, says we're not putting any money in. We're still the worst funded state university in America, and have been throughout my lifetime. So, what this means is that the towns that want to compete for it have to bid on it. They have to provide free land, free building materials, some money, one might hope. And so it's a bidding war. And Bennington bids, and Windsor bids, and I think Woodstock and Rutland, Williamstown over near Montpelier, etc. Half a dozen. Top bid is £400. A good deal of money in 1791. And Ira looks at the list and says, 400? I'll do 4,000. Now, bidding war is over, and Ira says, I'll only do it if you put it in Burlington, most of which he owns. And he donates the land, the green, most of us have been on the green. He donates that land and says, that's 1,500 pounds. And the new trustees say, great, so 2,500 in cash, right? And he says, oh yeah, it's in the mail. It's coming. In fact, he never pays it. He never redeems the rest of the pledge. He wants to. He sincerely believes in his heart that the University of Vermont is there to, as he says, not to educate the sons of rich men, but to educate the sons of farmers and mechanics. It's not Princeton, Harvard, Yale. It's for real people. But he doesn't have any cash flow. And I went to UVM. I worked for UVM. I raised money. I've given them a little bit. I think it's quite ironic. If you're a UVM donor, you can confirm this. The highest level of giving at the University of Vermont is the Ira Allen Society. And I think if I go in on Monday and offer them $50 million to put my name on a building, they'll give me the hockey tickets and the green and gold scarf and that sort of cool stuff. But if I don't actually pay the $50 million, my name is coming off the building. But still, the Ira Allen Society. For Q&A, some of you may, or UVM people may want to know, so how come there's a chapel at UVM named after a guy who never went to church? Had no religious affiliation whatsoever. So these are sidelights for Ira in the 1790s. The big dream, the country my soul delighted in, as he called it, is gin up that settlement at a pace that makes you money, take the products of the northern New England frontier, principally lumber, because you've got to cut down trees in order to create your farm, and that creates timber. Potash, it's easier to transport grain as alcohol than it is to transport it as grain, etc. Beef, the things we grow in a frontier economy. Take those, put them on large, big rafts, like rafts bigger than this room, float them into the lake from the rivers north to the Richelieu River, the Richelieu River to the St. Lawrence River, the St. Lawrence River northwest to the city of Quebec, the largest city in North America and the commercial entrepot for the Allen Empire. And on the way back, you're going to bring back the manufactured goods from Europe that the frontier wants but cannot make. And you're going to make oodles of money in both directions, set your own pace for land development, and we'll be the richest family in New England. Well, it's a great plan. He even sets up Levi at St. John. If you go to Montreal, you go right by St. John. It was a British fort in the 18th century because Levi had been a loyalist in the American Revolution. So the British sort of like him. And great idea. It falls apart on at least three things. One, we're no longer independent. Our customs relationship with Canada is set by the United States of America. And you get your rafts to the north end of Lake Champlain, and if the British customs officials are in a good mood, they wave you through. If they're in sort of a grumpy mood, you have to bribe them to go through. And if they're in a really bad mood, they just take all the stuff on your raft and throw it into the lake. This hinders consistency of profit. Second, the Richelieu is a bad highway because in the spring the water is too fast and your rafts get broken up. In the summer it's too low a water table and your rafts can't get over the rocks. So again, consistency is impossible. Most importantly, whatever you float to Quebec City, the Quebec merchants have you. They've got you because you can't float it back, and you cannot float it across the Atlantic. And the letters at UVM are full of denunciations by Ira of those stinkers at Quebec. They pay me 2 cents on the dollar for what I bring them, and then they charge me 150 cents on the dollar for what I buy from them. So by the middle of the 1790s, Ira is drowning in red ink. He's got a lot of debts. He has no cash flow. He cannot pay his property taxes on the 200,000 acres of northwestern Vermont that he owns. And he certainly can't pay his UVM pledge. In retrospect, you or I would look at it and say, 200,000 acres? Sell 100,000. You've still got a lot of land. And then you can set your pace. You'll have cash flow. And he doesn't do that, but he has a plan. That's one of the things I love about Ira. He's always got a big, bold vision and a plan. And the plan takes him to Boston. In December of 1795, he goes there. He mortgages, but does not sell his northern Vermont, half of his northern Vermont lands, takes the gold he gets, puts it in a false trunk, false bottom of a trunk, and he sails to England. First time he's ever left North America, really first time he's ever been anywhere. He didn't travel much outside of Vermont other than diplomacy. And he goes to London, and he asks for a meeting with the Secretary of the Colonies. And they, as he puts it, they kept me dancing attendance in outer offices, i.e. they won't meet with him and he has to sit out front in the waiting room with the secretary. Now, he had gotten Governor Chittenden to make him a major general in the Vermont militia, so he'd have a title, but I'm General Ira Allen of Vermont doesn't seem to cut a lot of ice with the British, who didn't know his grandfather. He's not related to the Duke or Earl of something. He's just another colonial wannabe on the make. So they make him wait. And finally they let him in. And he says, thank you. Here's my plan. Let's build a ship canal around the bad parts of the Richelieu. Let us connect Lake Champlain to the St. Lawrence River with a canal big enough that I can take an ocean-going vessel from Burlington to England, bypassing Quebec City. England will benefit, Vermont will benefit, the New York side of the lake will benefit, and well, yeah, maybe some of the Allens will benefit, but that's not why I'm doing it. And they make him wait some more. He outlines the plan. Weeks go by, and finally they call him back in and say, it's actually a pretty good idea, but if we do it, what do we need you for? Well, you and I at this point slink back across the Atlantic, try to salvage something here at home. Not Ira. No. In the Ira Allen world, if plan A doesn't work, there's always plan B, which is the exact opposite way of achieving the same thing. You can't deal with England in 1796. What do? You cross the English Channel and you go to France, England's greatest enemy in the world. And you go to Paris, which is under the rule of the Directory, supposedly now a democratic republic, having executed every aristocrat's pet, aristocrat's servant they could get their hands on, and are blathering endlessly about exporting revolution. No more kings. We are going to do away with monarchy and aristocracy worldwide. And Ira gets a meeting. He presents himself as an American revolutionary, and they buy it enough to let him in, and he says, here's the plan. You boys want liberté, égalité, fraternité spread around the globe? I know where to start. Let's start with your French-Canadian brethren in Canada. England stole Canada from you in 1761 after the French and Indian War. Most of the people living there are French by language, by ethos, by culture. Let's free them from British tyranny. You give me guns. I will personally recruit 10,000 Green Mountain Boys. We will overwhelm the weak British peacetime garrisons. I'll need some operating capital, of course. This isn't cheap or free. And you will send an army, a small army, across after the revolution to secure Canada, and we will call it United Columbia, and it will be a democratic republic. England will be hurt, Canada will thrive. He says to them partway through, gentlemen, you and I, we're sophisticates, we're philosophes. We don't need symbols, but the little people do. So he gives them a flag, 4 bars of silk, horizontal, red, white, blue, green. The French tricolor, the United States of America, and presumably green for the Green Mountain Boys, who are going to do the fighting. And he says, when we've done this, you know, maybe we should build a ship canal around the pesky parts of the Richelieu, and I'll be able to take ocean-going vessels from Burlington to France. And France will prosper, and Canada will prosper, Vermont will prosper, the Allens might make a little money. That's not why I'm doing it. And the Directory loves it. They really hate the English. I mean, they really want to stick it to England. And they have all of these free guns that they've captured in their wars around Europe, because you can't interchange the parts of a German musket with an Italian musket, with an Austrian musket, with a French musket. So they're lying in storehouses. There's no AK-47 factory that you can refit these things in. So they give him the guns. They give him 20,000 muskets. They give him 24 cannon. They give him money for his expenses. And he puts as many of the guns as he can cram into a little American ship that he charters. It's a wonderful name for a gun runner. It's called the Olive Branch. And he puts 15,000 muskets in them, in the Olive Branch, and he starts across the North Atlantic for home, for fame and fortune and success. You know, you got to figure that James Bond Sr. was in Paris, because the British seem to have known all about it. They send a warship after the Olive Branch. They capture the Olive Branch 3 weeks out. So he's quite a ways away from Europe. And they haul him back to Portsmouth. They unload the guns and they put them in a warehouse very close to the waterline, so they'll rust out in case he ever gets them back. They won't be usable. And then they decide to torture him to death. How many of you had to read Bleak House in college? Dickens, one of his lesser novels, yeah. I'll save the rest of you 500 pages. The gist of Bleak House is Jarndyce versus Jarndyce, which is billed in the novel as the longest running court case in the history of England. I think Dickens heard about Ira Allen and just changed the names, because the Brits just drag him through the courts. They assign him to a judge who hates Americans and says so every morning as he opens the proceedings. And they niggling this and picking at that. And, well, sure, the French gave you documents saying you bought the guns, he never paid a nickel for the guns. But it's not really notarized, is it? And this other document, you know, about you're going to sell them to state militias, that's your goal here. Aren't those commas in the wrong place? And this goes on for a year. He has time to write a history of Vermont and publish it in London. The whole history, the whole meaning is let's build a ship canal around the pesky parts of the Richelieu. And finally, the Brits say to him, if he could just get a little better paperwork. And he makes the biggest mistake of his life. He recrosses the English Channel and goes back to Paris, thinking his pals in the Directory will help him. But he doesn't know that the Wheel of Fortune has turned 7 or 8 times. All of his friends are dead or exiled. And the new Directory takes one look at him and says, sneaky-looking little guy, comes from England with England's approval, doesn't speak a word of French, friend of our now deceased enemies, British spy. They throw him in prison. They never charge him with anything. Just boom, in you go. And he lives for a year in 2 of the worst prisons in Paris. His health declines dramatically. In those days, if you don't pay for your food, you don't eat. in French prison, and probably prisons around the world. So he lives on handouts from American diplomats, American business people in Paris. And it's a terrible year. And then the French let him go. They don't say why, just kind of like, we need the cell, get out. But they won't give him paperwork to leave the country. So he's stuck both by paperwork and by health. He can't survive a voyage across the Atlantic. Takes a year for both of those to get better. He comes back to America in January of 1801, back to the Champlain Valley in May. He's been gone 5.5 years. He told Jerusha, I'll be gone 6 months. And in those 5.5 years, every single thing about his finances has collapsed. Other speculators have stolen his land. He didn't pay the taxes on most of it. His own nieces sue him. The Catlin brothers marry 2 of his nieces and take away the Winooski mills from him, the Winooski forges and sawmill and gristmill. He gets a year immunity from the legislature. No imprisonment for debt. Figure it out. You used to be a leader here, etc. Fights, doesn't work. Asks for another year. And the legislature says, give up. You're bankrupt as can be. Strike the best deal you can, but imprisonment for debt is your future. So he writes to his creditors, many of whom are Burlingtonians, and says, come across the river tomorrow night, big reception party at my house, and all your claims will be answered. They go across the river, down the hill, up the hill to the Eagle Block, and Ira waits till they're eating and drinking in his front parlor. He gets in a small boat, goes down the Winooski River to Lake Champlain. Instead of going north to Canada, he goes south. Goes all the way to Kentucky. And the reason he goes to Kentucky is that one of his few surviving friends in the world is Matthew Lyon, town father of Fairhaven, Revolutionary War soldier, congressman from Vermont in the 1790s, jailed by the Adams administration for daring to criticize the president, who has left Vermont, not very happy with the state that put him in prison. He goes to Kentucky and builds a new life. And he's either about to be or just has been elected to Congress. So when Vermont Jeopardy becomes a thing, and I'm the host, I'm Ken Jennings, because I know more useless Vermont factoids than anybody, and the final Jeopardy will be name the only person in American history to be elected to Congress from 3 principalities. Matthew Lyon was also elected from Arkansas. He dies before he's able to take office, but that's your winning answer. I will split your proceeds with you. But there's a loophole in the federal bankruptcy law that says if one person of good standing will swear to a judge that nobody has a claim of $50 against you, you can be immune from imprisonment for debt nationally. Well, Matthew Lyon knows perfectly well there are 500 people in Vermont with much bigger claims against Ira. Well, he puts his arm around him in court and says, Judge, nobody. I'm sure my good friend Ira has no debts. Judge listens to the congressman-to-be from his district, grants Ira federal immunity, which is going to work everywhere but Vermont. Because if he comes home, some influential creditor will find a judge to strike that down. So he goes to Philadelphia, and we don't know why. He spends the last 10 years of his life there. He is in bad boarding house to worse boarding house to the worst boarding houses in the city. He has no money. His health is just awful. He keeps busy by publishing pamphlets and books about the Olive Branch affair. And again, I will save you 1,500 pages of reading because the only point of those books and pamphlets is somebody cheated me, I want my money. And France owes me, England owes me, the United States didn't support me, somebody, I need to be made whole. and it doesn't work. It's a real bad decline. His family refuses to move to Jerusha, and the children refuse to go to Philadelphia. And then in the last 6 months of his life, Ira is reborn. This is the age of revolution in Central and South America. Simón Bolívar, Fernand Martín, etc. throw the shackles of Spanish rule off the population. 3 Spanish-American mercenaries come to Philadelphia, and somehow they wind up at Ira's boarding house. Their plan is a revolution in northern Mexico. Today is Texas. This is 1813, so we're 23 years before Jim Bowie and John Wayne Richard Widmark is Jim Bowie. John Wayne is a most improbable Davy Crockett. Watch the Billy Bob Thornton version instead. So, but that's their plan, is to take northern Mexico away from Spain. And Ira is reborn. Ira says, gentlemen, do I know revolution? I know I'm going on too long. I'm at the podium, so what can they do? Do I know revolution? I led the revolution in Vermont, and we got our own state. I had a great one going in Canada, and the Brits caught me. You guys, raise your money here in Philadelphia. Go south. My best advice to you, take a printer and a printing press with you, because you'll win more hearts and minds with the pen than you will with the sword. And when you win, I'm your ambassador to the United States of America, and I'm back on top. Well, the Gutierrez de Lara expedition goes south. It's an abject failure. It just falls apart the first time Mexican-Spanish troops fire at them. I think it's good that Ira does not live to hear of it. He dies in Philadelphia, January of 1814. He's 62 years old. The attending physician says retrocedent gout. I think it would have been just as accurate to say he wore out. He never recovered from the French prison experience. He is penniless. The Quakers bury him at the Free Quaker Cemetery in downtown Philadelphia. And I've looked for 40 years, found one mention of his death here in Vermont. The Burlington Sentinel, weekly 4-page newspaper, 3-line obituary. Died in Philadelphia, General Ira Allen, late of Colchester. And that's it for the guy who had once been one of the most powerful, one of the richest people in the state of Vermont. He was in the shadows of history for Vermonters by then. Just Ethan's little brother, maybe? We don't remember him. He's been gone for the better part of 25 years. And he stayed there right down to today. Again, I think the reason is because we cannot extol him as a wonderful founding father. I'm back where I started. I don't care. You don't have to like him, but you've got to get him in the picture. Evaluate him in human terms. There are times in his life when he is brave and bold and visionary, puts his own life on the line for good causes. There are times when he is grasping and greedy and devious. Well, he's a human being. Get him in the picture. If you do, I'll give you 3 things. One, I think you're going to learn a lot more about early Vermont, because Ira's involved in everything except religion. 2, I think you'll have a good time. He's never dull. You may not like him, but you can't say he's not interesting. So I'm pretty sure that you'll enjoy it. And 3, whether Ira watches you from up there, more likely down there, he'll enjoy the attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So we don't have time for questions, but Kevin has agreed to stay after if anybody has individual question and answers.
That's right. Buy a book, I answer a question.